Hello, it has been a long time and there are many things to share. Right now, Mercury's in retrograde, about to start moving forward again, so let's take this opportunity to review. We'll go back and review what we learned before, and then we will continue discovering the mysteries of time in the Fibonacci sequence. Here we have up here f of n refers to the Fibonacci sequence. We have the first 15 up to 610 here. A few of my favorites. The fifth Fibonacci number is 5, and f of 5 plus 5 is 5, 5. F of 11 is 89. We see up here, you add 11 to 89, f11 plus 11 is equal to 100, and f of 12 is equal to 144. I like those Fibonacci numbers. Do you like those Fibonacci numbers? Now remember, if we take the digital sum of the Fibonacci sequence, we will get the Paisano period of 9, because the digital sum is the same thing as modulo 9. So this gives us what I call the Paisano zodiac, and this is what it looks like when we draw it in a picture with all the fancy symbols, starting with 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and then 13, 1 plus 3 is 4, 21, 2 plus 1 is 3, and on, all the way back to 1, 9 is 0, 1, 1. This gives us a cycle of 24, which is why we say the Paisano period of 9 is equal to 24. We use the Greek letter pi as a symbol for that. Pi of 9 is 24. This is not related to the number 3.14. We're using pi as a letter. We're using pi as a function here. Mathematicians sometimes use the same letters for different things in different contexts, and we also have the Greek letter alpha. It's another Greek letter which is used for different things in different contexts, and in this context alpha of 9 is equal to 12 because the first multiple of 9 happens at f of 12, which is again 144, 12 squared. That is a multiple of 9, and so it is the first 0 in the Paisano zodiac. Next, we look at the Paisano period of 13, and we get the Paisano week. Pi of 13 is 28, that's the cycle length, and the first multiple of 13 is at the 7th position, so the 7th Fibonacci number is, well, it's 13 exactly. And this is what it looks like. That's the week. It's an astrological phenomenon based on numbers, not just some random guys putting things together and saying the gods rule these things. They actually were math geniuses and they figured all this out. So the 12 zodiac signs are ruled by the planets according to this numerical code here. It's 87421 goes backwards and forwards. So we get these from the odd indices. And for the week, we have this 4-to-1 ratio, 28-to-7, rather than the 2-to-1 ratio, 24-to-12. And so we end up with 7 planet numbers here. Instead of 14 or 28, we have 7. And on this side of the board, we have the planets listed with their prime numbers. So the first 7 prime numbers are in this first column here. And then we have their appearance within the week. And then we have each one has an appearance in the zodiac as well. And so these numbers are slight variations. You see Mercury is consistent. It's always 2. Venus is always 5. Mars is 13, but mod 9, 13 is 4. Saturn is 17, but mod 9, that's 8. And then the Sun is the only multiple of 3. The only multiple of 3 on the whole chart here is 12. The Moon is 11. Jupiter is 7. But then we've got this 111. This code within a code, so to speak. These ones here are kind of unique and different from the rest. I've sectioned these 3 off because we have this special trinity of 111 up here, which does not occur with the other 4. 111 is going to be a big topic for the rest of this video, but before I get to that, in case you're anything like me, you might be wondering what would happen if we just add all the numbers that are sectioned together in this chart here. So you probably weren't wondering that, but I was wondering that, so I went ahead and I added these up and got 21, I added these up and got 24, and 9, 37, 28, and 19. And then if we add up these entire columns, this first, second, and third columns, we get the totals 58, 52, and 28, and then when we add all these 3 together, we get 138. So that brings me to the question of what happens when you add all the prime numbers together. Because if we look at this first column, this is just the first 7 prime numbers here, and so those first 7 prime numbers add up to 58. If we go a little bit further, we can see here we are adding all of the prime numbers, and so we get 2, and then 5, then 10, then 17, then 28, 41, 58, 77, and 100. So the 9th number we get in this sequence is 100, and if we keep going all the way to the 37th number in the sequence here, we get a Fibonacci number. 2584 is the 18th Fibonacci, as well as the sum of the first 37 primes. Speaking of 37, that number is right here. It's the sum of these 4 prime numbers. And if we look at the column here for the week, this 24 and 28, these numbers here add up to 24 and these add up to 28 in the week column. And it just so happens that within the week we also have that pi of 13 is equal to 28. And in our other structure, our zodiac, the pi of 9 is equal to 24. So that 24 and 28, those 2 paisano numbers are right here, and they add up to 52, which is the number of weeks in a year. Now let's look at this 138 here. Maybe it's nothing, I just kind of on a whim added up all these numbers, but there's another way we could add up these numbers here, and I didn't make this up, but there's a concept that because the sun and moon are one, in an esoteric way, one might say they're the same light or the same force powering both sun and moon. If we take sun and moon literally to be 1 instead of 1 plus 1, 2, we would get 137. Or if we took one of, and another way we could do it is take 1 off the top and divide it by the 137, we get the ratio 1 to 137, which gives us what's called the fine structure constant. And we'll get to that again in just 1 second here. One literally means we have three different units. They're all units of time, one associated with the sun. Obviously, the day is based on the sun, and the month is based on the moon, if you're talking about a proper month from full moon to full moon and not some silly Roman concept of a month that doesn't make any sense. And then the bridge between the two is the week. We can see that when we look at the prime numbers, 3, 7, and 11 are the prime numbers for our trinity here. Jupiter is right at the midpoint between 3 and 11. 4 more than 3 and 4 less than 11. And we see the same pattern happening in the week because Thursday is also 4 days after Sunday and 4 days before Monday. If we imagine the most basic concept of a trinity, we would shape that as a triangle. So we take our 3 units of time, 1 unit for a day, 1 unit for a week, and 1 unit for a month. We make them into a triangle. And now we have an empty space inside of that triangle, and we use this circle because the circle, of course, symbolizes the number 0. So this circle represents the empty space inside of the triangle. So when we form the trinity into a triangle, we get a 0, which we can code as 1, 0, 1, 1 as the 0 inside the empty space inside of the triangle, which gives us this 1011 code, which is the same sequence of numbers we say at the beginning and ending of every Paisano period, because every Paisano period begins with 1, 1, and when it concludes the cycle, it goes back to 1 and then 0. So we get 10, 11. The sequence of the two numbers, the consecutive integers 10 and 11, form a code for the Paisano periods of all numbers, of all, because there are infinitely many Paisano periods. This represents them all, and we see that this triangle with the circle inside of it, the circle representing 0 for the empty space, that is actually a symbol for Paisano periods, the Fibonacci sequence, spiraling into all these prime numbers and patterns. Since we have a placeholder, the 0 is our placeholder, we can say 9 equals 0 and get the zodiac. We can say 13 equals 0 and get the week. So let's take a look at what happens at that specific position of 10, 11. Now here it's because 9 is 0, it's 1, 9, 1, 1. The end of the cycle, we have Cancer, symbolized by the crab, and then Leo, of course, the lion, water and fire. All right? Now, if you ask, conventional wisdom will suggest, we think maybe this is supposed to symbolize the pincers of the crab, because Cancer is the crab, right? But I'm going to argue it's actually the other way around. It's our numeral 9 is informed by the astrology. All right, the reason this is clearly a numeral 9 or 6, but they're looping around. This is a symbol of the number 9 looping in the exact same way we're doing in modular arithmetic. And coincidentally, this sign of Cancer just happens to be at that exact crucial point, the 10-11 point. And so that's really what this symbol is representing. It's representing where we are in this Fibonacci sequence. And so what is the crab? The crab has these pincers, right? These big pincers, which the 9 is shaping those pincers. So what's the 9 holding on to? It's holding on to this loop of 9 equals 0 and connecting back to the 1, 1. And furthermore, if you're familiar with the lunar mansions, the nakshatras, so there are 27 nakshatras that overlay around the zodiac. And because there are 27 of them, we can see that from the start at Aries, we count the first 9 nakshatras take us down to precisely here, the same point at the very end of Cancer, where it joins back to it's the 0 point, right? The 0 point or the 9 point coming back to, well, although there's a 9 on the other side, that's when it inverts and goes back to -1, which is 8. So the 888 here is -1, -1, -1 because we're mod 9, right? So the nakshatra, the 9th nakshatra, which comes number 9 right here, is symbolized by the snake. It is called the shlesha, the coiled snake. And in the exact way, same symbolism as the crab holding on, the snake is also holding on, and numeral 9 is also representing the snake. I have to say, the week is a curious thing. It's almost like an artificial, it seems kind of like a man-made concept, like they just came up with this number of days that would reflect well into the seasons in the year very closely. You see we have 13 weeks is precisely one season, which also happens to be the alpha of 13 squared, 169, the quarter cycle of mod 169, and the full cycle of 13 squared is 364, that's 52 weeks. So the number 7 for the week works very well in that capacity, but it also represents a quarter of the lunar cycle. And so in this way, the week bridges together both the solar and lunar, the day and the month, these two independent and transcendentally irreconcilable units of measurements are in a very special way bridged together from the week. And Jupiter, holding that position with the number 7, is thus elevated to the status where, well, Jupiter's known as the spiritual guru, and we can see that it is functionally through the week, through this number 7, Jupiter is informing us of this union between these divine masculine and feminine forces of sun and moon as we experience physically in the real world. Symbolically, you may be familiar with the hexagonal star representing a masculine upward facing triangle and a feminine inversion of that. So those two form the 6-pointed star, and from that we get 6 outside regions, these triangles, these 6 triangles on the outside, and then the 7th region inside is a hexagon. So we get 7 regions when we combine these two symbols of masculine and feminine, or sun and moon. So again, we see that this number 7 is the bridge. I use this symbol here informally. What I'm just saying here is that this one standing for the sun and this one standing for the moon, I'm saying that they are complementary, they are symmetric. And I use that symbol over here looking at these symmetric numbers, 19 and 91, 28 and 82, and culminating in 55. And what this is suggesting is the modulo 10 interpretation, which in the Fibonacci sequence gives us a cycle of 60. This is very interesting indeed, but we're not going to go into that right now, other than to say that in mod 10 we have these numbers which add up to 10 are complementary, they're negatives of each other. And so we're going to take a look, we're going to look at the middle of this. Right in the middle here we have 3 and 7, creating the numbers 37 and 73. And those are also, the 3 and 7 are the prime number codes for Sun and Jupiter. And of course, the code for Moon is 1, 1, which in itself is a symbol for what I'm using this informal symmetric relation to mean that the number 11, 1, 1 is already self-symmetric. So let's take a look at some of these fascinating facts about the numbers 37 and 73. Well, actually, we're going to start with a much bigger number from the top here, this 4-digit number 3,773. And we can split that into the sum of two symmetric numbers. 2701 plus 1072 is equal to 3,773. But what makes that particularly interesting is when you happen to notice that 2,701 is in fact the product of 37 and 73. Also, if we factor 3,773 into prime numbers, it is 7 cubed times 11, and there we get 7, 3, and 11 all in one equation. If we multiply 37 by 3, we get 111, the trinity itself. Since it's divisible by 3, it just turns out that it's 3 times 37. And on the reverse of 3773, we multiply that by 5, and we get 365. Now, if we look at some prime numbers, oh yeah, by the way, mod 73, alpha of 73 is equal to 37. And 37 and 73 are both prime numbers. If we look at the number, the order of prime numbers from first, etc., the 12th prime number is 37. And if we look at 12 backwards, we get 21. The 21st prime number is 73. And then if we remember, we multiply 7 times 3, we get 21. And this is the 21st prime. 7 times 3 is 21. And then if we add 12 and 21 together, we get 33. The 33rd prime is 137, which we mentioned earlier. That has to do with the fine structure constant, 1 over 137. And if we look at the decimal value, we get a repeating decimal, which is of length 8. But instead of starting at the first 0, let's start at the second. We get a pattern that goes, this repeating decimal goes forwards and backwards. 0729970, again going backwards and forwards, just like 3773. Again and again and again, we see this pattern of going backwards and forwards, just like the planets go retrograde, backwards and forwards, on and on. Let's clear some board space here. The biggest 4-digit number is 9,999.
that is just 9,990 plus 9. And 9,990 is 90 times 111. So let's use this very basic principle that whenever two numbers A and B add up to 90, we can multiply each of them separately by 111. 8 times 111 plus B times 111 will be equal to 9,990, and then when we add 9 to that, we get 9999. So I have chosen 14 multiples of 111 to put in this chart, and they come in 7 pairs. So we have a column for A and a column for B for the numbers we're going to multiply by 111. And so each of these blue pairs, 89 and 1, 82 and 8, 80 and 10, these pairs always add up to 90. And so what we'll get is the two numbers here and here, these will add up to 9,990, and then we'll add 9 to that and get 9999. You might have noticed that only in this row down here where we have 29 and 61, that's the only case where I added 9 on this column instead of the other column. And I'll tell you the very simple rule I use here is that I look at this 29 and I take the digital sum. That 2 and 9 add up to 11, which is 2 digits. So all the other numbers in the A column here, the digital sum is only 1 digit, but with 29 it's 2 digits, and so we add the 9 here. And if we look in this column, we'll see that we always get a 2-digit digital sum of the B values, except for with 61 and 80. Or equivalently, you could say if the 4-digit number does not contain identical middle digits, then you add 9 and you will find that the result has identical middle digits. Now we're going to see what happens when we add in all of those 9s and we put the numbers into a special arrangement. Now, notice that from these 14 multiples of 111, I have created 6 pairs which are symmetric pairs. We get all the symmetric pairs here, but this is 12 numbers and I had 14 over here, and that's because notice that these zeros, I could optionally add 9 to 1,110 and 8,880, and if I add 9 to those, then, well, look over here, I have symmetric pairs for there. 9879 plus 9 is 9888, and this one adds up to 9111. So we can do it with the zeros and as 9s, or we could use zeros in any of these 4 cases here. So in case you haven't caught on to where this is going yet, I think you might be able to figure it out, but let me show you the trick here. Just going to draw a simple line here in the middle section. Look at that, 10, 11. All right, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 4, 3, 7, 1, 8, 0. And then we go on, this is like a mirror, this blue line is like a mirror. Jump to the other side of the mirror, 8876415628 10 11. And then over here we have the exact same thing, mirror image. We have produced 2 copies of the Paisano zodiac using 14 multiples of 111. Absolutely astonishing. Alright then, it's time to wrap this up. That was a lot of random little bits of arithmetic and trying to weave together this whole big puzzle which has been part of all of our lives for so many centuries. These systems of time have been held, and yet this knowledge was somehow lost. Who received this knowledge? Did Jupiter come down here? Did Jupiter send psychic messages from the sky to guide us to learn these numbers? Or were people just way more intelligent 10,000, 500,000 years ago? I don't know. I just know these numbers work.